Well, good morning, everybody. I trust you are well. Thanks for joining me on this adventure. And yeah, please like, subscribe, share my videos, and let's grow the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. So there's the channel details. There's lots of fun goodies on the channel. Please go and play around with the channel, and I appreciate your support. With that said, let's continue in our current series of demand and supply in Excel. I said we've done 3 videos on the demand function. Now we're busy with our supply function. Only one video because a lot of the things we've covered in demand. So there's one video on supply. And now we're going to do a little bit on equilibrium. Because that's ultimately where we are heading towards working with demand and supply. So just as a quick recap, there's my demand sheet, my demand function or my demand variables, my demand signs, demand coefficients, demand variables, demand calculations, quantity demand calculations, demand curves, etc., etc. So there is that sheet. Then we have the supply sheet with exactly the same, just from the supply side. I've got my supply variables, my supply signs, my supply coefficients, my supply variables, the equations, and I've got my supply curve and its price. And I said they all have a base and a derived of a scenario. Okay, so you can compare if this changed, if that changed, etc., etc. So there's my demand and supply sheets, or my demand and supply models, if you want to express it in that way. So now, obviously, it's time to do equilibrium. So this video will just basically look at setting up the equilibrium spreadsheet, and then the basic of demand and supply, getting equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity. And then we'll expand on it with price floors, ceilings, consumer surpluses, producer surpluses, etc., etc. So, but for now, I'm just going to focus on the basics. So it's just a copy and paste from the demand sheet and the supply sheet, and I just add it together with a couple of modifications and adjustments, and there we go. So first of all, we have to set it up. So there's my two quantity demands. There's my quantity demand and quantity supply, QDX, QSX. That's what we want to calculate. Abbreviation is the coefficient is Y. The symbol for the quantity demand, quantity supply, both is Y. I actually should put here the YD and YS, but let's leave it for now. We know that that is quantity demand and that is quantity supply. That's what we're going to calculate. Sort of justified in the middle. Okay, so there's my demand variables, own price, price of substitute, price of complements, income, taste, preferences, marketing, seasons. Remember, constant is not a variable per se, but obviously we have to include it since there's going to be always a demand, etc., etc. We've been through that in the first video too. You're welcome to recap there. And there's the variable abbreviations, the signs, and the symbols. There's the actual coefficient when we add a value to the coefficient and we add the sign, and there's the value of the variables, and there is the derived. That's the base values and that's the derived values, and that's the difference between the base value and the derived value. The base value is the value of the variables, and the derived is the manipulated or the scenario values of these variables. So that's my demand side. That's my demand side. And then I have my supply side. Then I have my supply side. Own product, input cost, prices. There's the abbreviation. There's the signs. There's the symbols. There's the coefficients with the sign and the value. There is the value of the variables. And there is the value of the variables in the derived format, and that's a change in the variables. And then obviously a constant, and then the residual standing on its own. So that is the demand and supply functions with its signs, with its coefficients, with its values, the base values and its derived values. Remember, the derived values where we do the scenarios. If that change, if this change, that, etc., etc. So there we go. Now you'll see I don't have elasticities in here because the elasticities only work ceteris paribus in demand and ceteris paribus in supply. We don't need it for equilibrium calculations per se. Maybe a little bit later, but not now. So there's my supply function. Let's make it bigger, quickly a bit bigger. There's my supply function. And again, exactly the same as here. Okay. And there's my demand function. Then I basically have my demand expression or equation and my supply expression or equation. Okay, so there they are. Now, you'll notice that the symbols are the same. I've copied and pasted as is. I actually need to change these symbols so that they are supply side and these are demand side symbols. But that's just cosmetic. We'll change it. So there's my two sub functions, my demand function, my supply function. There's my demand equation or expression, and there's a demand and supply expression and equation. Now, if I then assume equilibrium, equilibrium is where quantity demand and quantity supply is the same, then obviously these two equations will be the same, and that is basically what's stating there. There's my demand side equation and there's my supply side equation. Okay, and then there's my derived demand side equation, there's my derived supply side equation. Let me just get rid of that. And I'm going to do a draw and do it that way. There we go. And there we go. Save. Okay, so there's my derived demand side and my derived supply side. Meaning all that I'm doing is when I derive, I calculate all the variables which is not the own price. And I add them to my constant. So that's basically what deriving means. So there's my functions, there's my expressions or equations, and there's my equilibrium statement. There's my derived demand curve, and there's my derived supply curve. Okay. So what we can do now, obviously, we can do demand and supply so that we get to our demand curve and our supply curve, meaning there's my equilibrium price and there's my equilibrium quantity. So for example, there is my parameters. So this is my demand side workings. There's my demand side workings. There's my demand side workings, meaning there's my derived equation, quantity demand constant. Okay, quantity demand is my constant alpha minus my beta price x. What is my constant? 50. There's my constant, which is 50. And my minus sign, that sign there. What is my coefficient? Minus 0.5. That's my coefficient, minus 0.5. And what is my price? My price is 5. That's the price of 5. So I can calculate that. And that is, okay. First of all, so that's price minus, here's my reduced, the value of my reduced variables. So that's all the variables. So that is the price of the substitute, price of a substitute, price of a complement price. So all these variables I reduce, just calculating them. Because 3 times that, that times that, that times that. So I reduce it, so I only have that variable. So the value of my reduced variables is 29. So that then added to my constant, that gives me 76. 76 minus 0.5 times 5 gives me 3. 2.5, but rounded. So 79 minus 3 gives me 76. And this is just the reduced or the derived of the scenario. So if I say the scenario, it will influence this part here. Now what I'm doing here, in fact, I must just quickly do this as well. And the purpose, what I'm doing here is, let's see now. So that's one. Let's see if it will to, no, is equal to that plus, I'm giving it a range, not 1, 0,1. I'm setting up a range of variables here. Why? Because then I can plot them in my graph. Because otherwise, if I only have 3 or 4, then the graph doesn't look very good. So that's just what I'm doing here. So all I'm doing here, and I want to get to 1 basically, or to 2. I think we're going to get to 2. Let me just rather input it there. You'll see now what happens. Okay, so I think it should go to 2, yes, because my supply is also to 2. So then I can just do this, and I can draw them down. There we go. These will be -2s the whole time. I can do this. Sorry, I should have done this before the time. It's just to improve the graph. You see now the graph is better ranges. Otherwise, if it's just 6 and 8, then you only have this part. So I expand on this range so that I have more values to work with within my time series. Okay, so let me just finish up this one here. There we go. Okay. So all I've done is I've just expanded on this range so that I have a better looking graph. So you'll see the prices is up to 10. So for example, if we do that, you'll see, why is it not showing? It's supposed to show. There we go. That one is showing. Yep, there we go. So it's just so that the graph has more range. Yeah, it presents better if I have more values here. So these values are just, so for example, that is simple, just that value times the price. Quantity supply, oh, sorry, yeah, so that's quantity demand. So it's that times 0.5. And then obviously quantity demand is then 0.5 times that 79 minus that times that gives me 78. So if the price is half a rand or half, then the quantity demand would be 8. When the price of 5, the quantity demand will be 76. If the price is 10, the quantity demand will be 74. So you can see the inverse relationship between price and demand. And that gives me my demand curve. That gives me the demand curve. Okay. Then you can expand on the range, etc., etc. Anyway, and I do exactly the same with supply. I do exactly this. There's my derived supply curve. Quantity supply is equal to my constant plus beta times price x. In this case, my constant is 0. See there, my constant is 0. My derived variables or reduced variables. So that's all the other variables, supply side variables except own price. You'll see there, it's input cost, price, technology, etc. I take the coefficient, multiply by the price, and I add them all up, and I get a value of 66. So the reduced variables in the demand side is 29. The reduced variables on the supply side is 66. So my constant, which is 0, plus reduced variables is 66, plus is the sign. 2 times 5 is 10. 2 times 10 plus 66 give me 76. And I do the same here. My supply, my price, and my quantity supply for each price. And I can draw my supply curve. And then obviously our equilibrium price is 5. We can bring that in now. And our quantity demand is 76. We can bring in that as well. So we can put a line there. We can put a line there. I'll get that ready for the next video. We'll put in demand and supply. But anyway, let's quickly have a look. So there's my demand and supply model. Okay, so let's quickly save it. So let's, for argument's sake, now, as I said, We can change demand here. Okay, I can change it there. No, it's not linked. Yes, it's linked. So if I change demand here, so let's say price of a substitute increase from 10 to 20 Rand, it doubles. Okay, that is inelastic. Demand increase from 76 to 84, that's a shortage, it's inelastic. Demand curve shifts outward to the right. It results in an increase in total revenue because the demand, cross price elasticity demand is inelastic. So let's have a look. Supply side, nothing changes. Supply side is exactly the same. What happens to equilibrium? You see there, it didn't change. Why? Okay, so let's quickly do that. Let's link it to that one. Let's link it there. So that now increased to 10. Okay, exactly the same. So let me just, that is linked already. Now that's also linked. Okay, so let's say it changed to 20. Okay, so that's now linked. It runs through the system. There's the 66 and the 84. It runs through the system, and voila, there's my demand. Demand increase from the initial demand function to the new demand function. What happens to equilibrium? The price now? Price increase from the 5 to the 8 Rand. Quantity demand increase from 76 to, what's it, 83, 84, 83. There we go. There's the price is the same. The supply and is the same, 83 at 8.5. Nope, it doesn't make sense at 10. 10. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, that's 8 Rand. 8 Rand. It is 82 and 82. 8 Rand. It's 82. 8 Rand. 83. 10 Rand. 8 Rand is 82, 83. So that's about 83. They're about at the 8 Rand. So now we can say, okay. Now we can say, okay, let's say at the same time, the price, technology, there's a technology boom, and that goes from 10 to 12. Okay, so our technology increases by 4. So it runs for the same one here. There's increase in supply. Let's have a look at equilibrium. You see there, it has run through to that. And let's have a look and see, there's my equilibrium now. So there's my increase in demand, and there's my increase in supply. So it got from 5 Rand to 8 Rand, and now it came down to 5 Rand again, and 84. Quantity demand is 84. So what's the net result? For those two effects, the price have stayed the same as 5 Rand, but my quantity has increased from 76 to 82. So you can see the nice how we can play now. So we can play now around with any type of scenario. So let's just make that again. So we can play around with any form of scenarios. You can have you can have multiples. You can have 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. How many changes you want to do. You can all do it there, and it will automatically give you the new demand and supply functions. And that's why I wanted to make the size bigger so that we can have clear vision on, or can clearly see the movements in the demand and supply curve. If the range was very small, and I think it's still a little bit too small, then you don't actually get a full understanding of the demand and supply movements. So that's why we want to make it quite big, so that we can see them clearly. The demand curve is very steep. We can make the demand curve a bit more flatter. Anyway, there we go. So there's our basic demand and supply model. So there's my demand side function. There's my supply side function. There's my equilibrium calculations. And there is my equilibrium demand and supply curves. And from here, as I said, we can now play around till the cow comes home. We can make all sorts of changes. As I said, there's still some work to do on this. It's not ready yet. There's still lots of calculations that we need to add in. I need to do a lot of drawings here, but that will happen. That will happen in due course. So then after we're going to have a lovely spreadsheet, a lovely Excel-based spreadsheet, which we can model demand changes, supply changes individually, collectively, different sizes, and we can change the coefficients. We can say all sorts of things. And it will give us the instant results to see what happens with equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity. Okay, so cool. Let's park there for now. It gives me some time to play around with it. And as soon as I'm ready with the next installment, then I'll put it on a video. And I said, once it's ready, then I'll happily make it available. If anybody wants, I'll happily make it available. So, yeah. And again, before I conclude, let me just again say thank you. And pretty much please ask again that you like, share, subscribe to the channel. It does help a massive difference. And it's always welcome and appreciated. Okay, so with that said, I'll see you on the other side.